Okay, peeps, this is a quick video for Tom made a request, and so I just want to answer you in video form. It's probably the easiest way, and I'm sure this will be useful for anyone. But so Tom had two questions which were, expressed to me on video, and one was, how do I make my patch polyphonic so I can play chords, not just one line? And what's the deal with filter modulation of some kind, get weird, or some stupid line that I included on the class. So if you're in the grid, obviously with your PolyGrid open, you've made a synth, you can select this header here. And so the info panel on the left, if the info panel isn't shown, you can open it that way. We'll change to reflect things for obviously that object or that device or that thing that you've got selected. And up here is where we want to be looking. So we can give our synth a name, my synth. We can make it active, we can enable it, and this is what we're looking. And there's a little difference here that's quite important. So voices is at the minute mono, obviously, and active voices, if you're in mono mode, one is always active, so you can play your one note all the time. We could change to digi, and that's going to hot switch whether we've played a note or not. So if I hit a note, you'll see it switches on. Down here my synth is making some noise, and as soon as I stop after a certain period of time, it's going to shut up and give that voice back to Bitwig to use elsewhere. That's really important when you're dealing with large patches. So true would just be constantly live. It's constantly rendering that audio, and at the minute it's just rendering silence. But this is where the magic happens. Obviously it's in mono, and if we want to play, let's say, 10 notes at once, that will give us, you're not using any voices of 10 potential voices, so now we could use all of our fingers. We can go up all the way to 64, but that obviously is hugely demanding, although Bitwig is very efficient. So now I should be able to play a chord. And you see as I keep adding notes, it's eating up those voices. Fantastic, so that will probably save your sanity a little bit, and you might be sat there going, oh my god, I can't believe that was this there, and I looked at it all along, but I didn't know what I was doing. That's fine. I had to Google to find that out at one point too. The other thing was filter modulation. So obviously we could map that to a controller, but I'm talking about doing it internal to your patch. So the second part of the question was, how do I add modulation to the filter, or what do I really mean? Maybe it was the wording that was confusing you, but it's find a way to modulate a filter of some kind. So obviously we've met the grid before, and we know that the little dot with the arrow is modulator data. So that's the kind of visual cue for a modulator data in the grid. So we could, for example, grab the modulator. For this one we'll use the ADSR, and then we'll click and hold and go, I want that to be mapped to the cutoff of this low pass filter. Click back on. If we highlight that, we can see the amount and where it's going, cut off here. So now if we close that a little, this envelope shape is going to draw, and instead of changing the amplitude of a signal, it's actually changing the amplitude of what we've now modulated over here. So we should see that cutoff fly open for this phase. And then when we hit the sustain phase, the cutoff will come back to a certain place. And then when we release, it will end up back where it started. So here we are, sustain. We can see the blue line change if we change where the sustain is. And when we let go, if we leave that open, we can see the filter shut up when it gets to the end. So fantastic. So that's the hard modulator. Use that, map it to a knob as a modulator. Okay, and we can see the signal coming out there. If we didn't want to do that, we could take just the envelope signal, this, let me get rid of that blue signal, and map it straight to here. Which is very similar but slightly different. I believe they call it, it's in pitch amount, so you're dealing with semitones. When we map it to the knob itself, we're obviously dealing in hertz. So that's another way of thinking about it. And of course, maybe one good way of doing it this way is we could stick an attenuator or a gain in the middle of that. So now this has impact over there. We can leave that full ball always and control the amount here. course, we could steal that and plug an LFO in there. So exactly the same. This has a modulator if we want to hard map it to something, but instead what we're using is the LFO shape, which is positive and negative. Of course, we could just use positive, so we're only opening the filter. We could have both, and then we've routed that through here, acting on 100%, and that's going to just attenuate the output of that modulator. Yeah, that makes sense. And then of course we can riff on that, like how about we pop that LFO and then we shape it So now what's happening is we're making a waveform triangle, but we're shaping it through an ADSR, very similar to this. We've got gain control, it's mapped to the filter. So we've always got the LFO firing, but the LFO output level is being attenuated or shaped by this over here. So numerous different ways, there's all sorts of ways that you could do, but that would be one of the ways that you could modulate a filter, or very common. Of course, we could do exactly the same with the resonance, or we could take this and invert it, and then when the cutoff is opening, the resonance is dropping. Away you go. You're laughing. I hope this answers your question.